tonight's lesson is on family vacations. It's one of those lessons that it's really good, it's really important, but it's also really short. So hopefully, you guys have some discussion, some input, things that you can add in, some ideas that you liked, or some ideas that you've done as a family that we can all kind of share and talk about. Otherwise, I mean, we'll be done pretty quickly, which is fine too. There's nothing wrong with being done quickly because everybody's tired. So, that's all good as well. Which one quick thing before we get too much into it. If you don't know, Lane has a new single, or a couple of new songs, new album that was released today. So he is on Pandora, he's on Spotify, he's on iTunes, he's on pretty much anywhere that you can have music, except for Alexa. For whatever reason, she won't play Lane. She keeps trying to play some other country singer, and she gets confused about morning and evening and whatever. But
Alexa she'll play the first song.
What do you want me to play?
Oh, stop, Alexa. She'll play Give Him Grace. Give Me Grace. But
I didn't try that one.
Does not have the two new ones yet. That's the first.
There, Alexa started playing when you said Alexa. Alexa, stop.
Now mine's going off too. I love it. It's all good. So make sure and check out his music. It's really good. I mean, not that his music is ever not good, but this is legitimate. This sounds awesome. So that's exciting, and Lane can give you more details, I'm sure. But lesson. So the idea is the importance of spending time away together. Spending time in your daily routine is important. That's a part of it, but it's those times when you get away, when those relationships can really be built and memories can be made. It's funny, but like, we spend every day together, and we do stuff together. We talk, we all try to eat dinner together. Here lately, since the boys have been home from school, we've been eating breakfast together and lunch together and dinner together. And, we spend lots of time together, but at the same time, I think we would all benefit from a vacation together as well. Like spending time outside of your normal routine, and just, doing those new experiences that's always a good thing. And I thought that was really cool. So what, I guess the usual question, what really stuck out to you in the reading? Like, what was the most significant thing that you came across?
So for me, one of the things that stood out wasn't necessarily new, but it reinforced something. We vacationed every year as a family, and that was always something big and significant. But my parents own a timeshare, and as part of owning the timeshare, every year we'd go sit through the meeting where they tried to get us to buy more points for whatever the free thing they would give us as a result of sitting through the meeting was. And I saw my dad storm out of more of those meetings when they would not listen than I could count. And then as I got older, and once we were no longer there, my parents would be on vacation, and I'd talk to them, and it'd be like, I'd ask if he had to sit through a meeting, and they tried to give himself something. And eventually the answer started being, yeah, I bought more points. And I'm like, who are you, and where's the man who raised me? But as I was talking to him, I remember a conversation about the time Ben was born, where he had just upgraded to what I thought was an ungodly amount of annual points to be able to book things. And he said, when I was growing up, we never went on vacations, ever. He said, we didn't. He said, but I want, when you and Jordan look back and think about your childhood, I hope those are things you remember. The times we had together, the places we went. And he said, and I wanted to be able to do that for our whole family. And so for him, he upgraded so that he had enough points to be able to book a week for all of us to go if we all wanted to go, for our whole family to be able to go, because that was something that was very important to him that I never even realized. Like, I never realized how important those trips were to my dad until this conversation a few years ago. And then, so as I was reading this, it kind of hit me like, oh yeah, this goes back to all those other things. Like, it's really a big deal.
Yeah, one of the things that, kind of came across to me was, in all the reading and stuff, it was kind of said several different ways, several different times, that it's not about how much money you spend or where you go or what you do or really anything. It's not about the trip itself. It's about spending that time together. And that's the hard part for us as adults to understand, because for us, it's always about, well, the destination or, what activities we're going to be doing. But for them, is really more about that time together. At one point, the book says, it's almost like we buy back family intimacy on every vacation. The bonding that happens is worth every penny. It's that time spent together that kind of helps reconnect. And this is something that's true not just within families either. It's something that if you'll pay attention, you'll see this in all sorts of areas. That's why, a lot of companies will do retreats. That's why, like, as a leadership group at the church, we do retreats on a regular basis. We go out and we spend time together, and that builds those relationships, because sometimes we go through some frustrating meetings, and it's those times that we spent together building that relationship that kind of makes it work. Same thing is true with, the youth group, with any youth group. When you spend time together, that builds those relationships, and it helps kind of solidify those connections. Because if you go through a period of time like we've been going through, where you can't go to summer camp and you can't go on these overnight trips, you don't really have the opportunity to build those connections that kind of slowly fizzle over the year. You have to try to find new ways to rebuild that. And, I think if we're honest, we all kind of feel that within the church family as a whole. We've lost that connectivity because we haven't been able to spend that time together, and it's hard. But as much as we notice it in those other settings, it's absolutely just as true within our families. And it's hard because, when I think about going on vacation, I think about going somewhere and doing something and spending money, because that's what vacations are as adults. It's about going somewhere and doing something and how much money it's going to cost. But for our kids, and growing up, thinking back to my own childhood, we didn't have, money to go places and do things. The most exotic vacation I ever remember going on as a family was when we went to Murfreesboro, Arkansas to dig for diamonds. But I still remember spending time in that 150-degree field looking at dirt. But that was a memory that was made. Most of the time we would, go down to the Perrys and spend a weekend camping on the river. Like, that was our vacation. But it was so important that we spent that time together. And, that it's kind of one of those things, what they say in the book rings true. It really doesn't matter where you go or what you do or how much money you spend, because it's about the time that you spend together and experiences that you have during that time. I guess, what are some ways that within your family that you've seen this happen? Like some ways that you've seen these relationships grow, or these things kind of work themselves out. How do you see that in your experience? And this is, teens or adults, anybody can answer this one.
So Robert, I think you're right, and those family vacations are a good place to build your family camaraderie, build relationships. Depending on what you do, if you fill your time up doing stuff that that keeps you busy where you can't bond or you can't connect, it may be an issue. But we're kind of beach people, so we've always gone to the beach. And if you sit in a lawn chair beside someone day in and day out, you talk to them, and so that worked well for us. And so I think each family just has to figure out what works for their family, what they want to do. But I think it's important on those vacations to spend time with each other and to do what they're intended to do. Relax together, bond, just be together and do things together as a family unit. And I think that's important.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. So busy that we lose sight of what's what we're going on vacation for. There's several vacations that I've been on that by the time that we got there, I was so stressed out and exhausted and frustrated that I couldn't enjoy anything that we did. And then when we got home, then it was time to go back to work and spend time at the office. And it was more stressful going on a vacation than it was if we just stayed at home the whole time. But that's something that I have to work on within me, something that I need to kind of work through, because it's important for the family that we have time to do that. It's not just this time that we get behind. It's time that we really get ahead on the things that are important. Definitely something we take for granted. So anybody else see family vacations as important, or some evidence that you've seen for why they're important?
Robert, I don't know if this really answers your question about why they're important, but for me, when I was reading that first part where the person was reflecting on just the memories, kind of like we were saying before, but it was little things, even just like talking to their brother in the car and reading the map and the signs together. So I think for us, when we're in cars traveling, we don't actually do iPads and phones. We kind of play the road trip games where you look for letters and look for signs. And I just think that's like, just for us in our car, something that's kind of important for our family, where we're not on our phones. We're just talking, trying to be bored in the car together and do those kind of things.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. One of the things that they talked about was, or one of the examples they gave was, when they would travel as kids, they remember the first couple of days, their kids would always fight. But after that time, they were able to really get along and do well. And I think that's one of those things that we see a lot. Like it may be rough at first, being, off somewhere different, or riding in the car for any length of time, or whatever it is. There are things that make it hard, but then if we can push through that hard, then things start to get better. And that's where those trips are important, because if they're not long enough, all we do is get the frustration. And that's, like I was saying before, it's frustrating and it's stressful. And for me, my tendency is, okay, I know it's going to be frustrating and I know it's going to be stressful. So let's make it short as possible, so that, we do the frustrating and stressful and we get it over with. But that's really not the case at all, because as we spend more time together, we get through the frustrating and stressful, and then we get to the point where we can really bond and get closer, do what those vacation times are meant to do, and then kind of return to our normal once we get back. But without building those connections, without getting closer together, then you kind of continue to drift almost, without those intentional times of rebuilding, it seems. So what did you guys think about the part where it was talking about giving kids a voice? That was it was kind of difficult. Like growing up, it wasn't I guess it wasn't really much of an option. Like we didn't really talk about as a family where we were going to go or what we were going to do, because we knew where we were going to go and we knew what we were going to do. Like we were going to go camping in a tent, either, well, somewhere along the Illinois River. And we were going to spend, 2, 3, 4 days. And we were going to spend most of the time fishing and swimming and, sitting around a campfire. Like it was our routine. But I think there's a lot of truth in, especially as they get older, giving your kids an opportunity to kind of buy in on what they're doing. Because it's really easy just to tell them what you're going to do, and they may or may not like it. But if you give them an option to choose or talk through it as a family, then you're including them more in the experience, you're including them more in the discussion, and they're going to buy into it a lot more. They're going to be more involved and more active. Now, obviously, if, when the conversation comes up and you ask your kids where you want to go, they say Disney World, that may or may not be in the budget. But then that gives you that opportunity, especially as they're older, to talk through, well, that's a really good idea, but I don't know that we're going to be able to do that this summer because that's a really expensive trip. And you can kind of have those conversations about budgeting or about money or about, what's really important. So I think it's really good, but there are definitely some challenges that come with opening that can of worms.
I think one of the things they suggested, though, in that conversation is that it also doesn't have to be the big thing. I mean, I recall maybe sometimes, we, in all of the years of us vacationing, I think we only ever went to the same place once. My family was different than a lot of families in that. I know a lot of people who do go to the same place every year, but I think we only ever went to the same place twice on one occasion. But so sometimes I think we were given the choice. My parents would kind of have a list of places they were looking at. But one thing we did do was there was at least always one day where my brother and I got to pick what we did that whole day. And we set the day. So even if there were days where my mother had the schedule so planned out, like we were going to wherever she had lined up, there was one day of vacation that was ours. And most of the time it consisted of things like staying at the resort and swimming and playing mini golf and things like that. But there was always one day that was ours. And so even if we didn't have a say, especially when we were younger, that one day was more exciting because that was our day.
Yeah. I mean, I was really hoping somebody was going to bring that up, because that was one of the things that came about in the text was, there are other ways to do it. If you can't just, let them pick or that obviously that's not always going to work out, but giving them the flexibility. Like one example was, in the afternoon during some downtime, you let your kids pick the activity, or, like Jared had just mentioned, having a day set aside that was, what they choose. It's the simple things like that that just kind of gets them excited and kind of brings them into the picture more. So I think that's really good. Really, really good. So I guess with that kind of in mind, have you guys started planning your vacation for next year? As if 2020 wasn't enough to get everybody excited about planning, but I mean, have you guys started that process? Has anybody kind of begun that journey?
We kind of have, just because ours was canceled this year. So we're carrying it over to next year. We're hoping to go to a beach because we are beach people, and I haven't been to a beach in 6 years, 7 years. So that's going to hopefully be our goal.
That's really cool. For whatever reason, I've never really seen the appeal. I mean, for myself, I guess it hasn't been appealing to me to go to the beach. And I've been to, several beaches in the Gulf or around Florida or whatever. And Bob and I were actually talking about this earlier today. He's about to go to the beach down in Florida. And So, that's never been exciting at all until I went to the West Coast and got to spend some time in Washington and Oregon. And to me, that's my kind of beach. Like that was, hiking the shoreline and finding these little tide pools and all the, life and stuff that's in it. Like that is my kind of beach. That's fun. And it totally stinks that it's a really difficult drive to get to Washington State, but that would definitely be our go-to destination. So anybody else got anything planned?
We're planning on going to New Mexico next year.
Awesome.
Grand Canyon. Yeah, stuff like that.
Me and my dad were planning on going like either California or Colorado sometime around Thanksgiving.
Nice. If you do it right, you can drive through Colorado to get to California. May not be the fastest way, but you could do both that way. Colorado's a lot of fun. That was one thing that we've done in the past is we would go with some friends out to Colorado, and we go to this, it's not really a camp, but it's a summer town, I guess. The area wasn't open during the winter because of the snow and the altitude and everything. But come like June and July, everything was melted off. You could go trout fishing. You could spend a week, and it would take you a day or so to get over the altitude sickness and the height and the pressure and all that. But it was always so much fun. I love Colorado, but that's just me. I love that. So here's the question. Have any of you guys, in talking about planning for your vacation, have you included your kids in the discussion? Obviously, Cash's dad has included him, but that.
So we usually just kind of include the kids in the day-to-day conversation. So, I mean, we haven't even planned a place or anything. So there's not that close of plans. But when we do trips, it's kind of like a day-to-day thing, kind of like the discussion y'all were talking about earlier.
Yeah, what are
that's
some?
Like our kids make so many decisions for us on the activities we do now these days.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not as easy as it was to make plans in general. I mean, it's just it's difficult. It is. So in the text, there was a section about our kids not wanting to go and the importance of those social interactions. In reading that, I absolutely identify with it. When in one of the sections they were talking about, their teenager not wanting to go on their summer vacation because they were going to miss out on a party, and how that was going to impact the whole vacation because of 3 hours that they would be spending at a party with their friends. Like the significance of those social things, sometimes we take for granted, but I guess as parents, we need to try to walk that line of, including our kids, but also trying to plan, including some of their things as well, like trying to take into account some significant things that are in their life, because just because it's not important to us doesn't mean that it's not important to them either. Let's see, what was I going to say? It did talk about, being able to, I guess, talk through those things with your kids, with your teens, especially if they're not wanting to go on vacation because of something that they're going to miss out on. Talking through that, like, why is this? Like, acknowledge that there is that social interaction or whatever it is that they're missing out on is important. Like, we need to try to identify with that and not brush it off altogether. But talking through that means a lot. And if you're willing to have the conversation, then it will make a huge difference. Because really the goal is to go on a family vacation with your family. And if you end up leaving, a teenager behind to stay with another family member or by themselves, you're kind of missing out on that family time, and it's defeating the purpose. So trying to include everybody and trying to get everybody to where they want to be included as well is kind of important. But that's kind of, I guess it goes back to why it's important to include your kids in the discussion, in the planning. That way, if they're missing out on something, they'll still know that they're going to get to have experiences that they wanted, that they chose, that they've kind of already bought into. It helps avoid some of that issue as well. The stuff at the end of the chapter, some of those ideas that were presented. Did you guys see any of those that really, I guess, kind of resonated or seemed like it would work well with your family? No, there were several good ones that I thought about.
I don't know if I'm thinking of the right part that you're referring to, but I just remember like as a kid on our vacations that when they talked about the part like planning your church, like where you're going to attend church while you're on vacation, that was always something that we did as a kid. And you know, it's harder when you go to like out of the country, but if you're just traveling, you know, in the States or something, I think it's important to plan where you're going to go to church, even while you're on vacation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things, even, I guess we kind of carried on the tradition after Carrie and I got married and we're way removed from the house. We would go on vacations together with some of our friends in the area, and we would go 2 or 3 times a year. We would go out and go camping. And usually it was somewhere around Greers Ferry Lake. And every year we would do it. One of the highlights of the trip was on Sundays, and there were 2 other couples that were there with us usually. We would take turns, or not really take turns, I guess, but we would have a service there, you know, by the side of the lake. We would sing a few songs, which sounded absolutely horrible, but we would sing a few songs, and we would kind of have a Devo together. Usually, I would, you know, lead some sort of a devotional lesson, and we kind of sit around and talk about the Bible and talk about our faith and how, you know, how things were going. And I can remember the first one that we planned, and we talked about this. It was like, oh, this is going to be so awkward. But it wasn't very long. Like, we were really looking forward to that time together. And, you know, as we got a little older, as we started having kids, we didn't do it as often. But I can remember there were a few times that we did after Evan was born. And it was just so cool to include him in that process. It's just, I don't know, it's one of those special memories. And I really want to get back to that with Evan and Levi now. Being able to go out and kind of plan that, talk through that together about just the significance of it. And whether it's, you know, picking out the church that you're going to attend, or talking about doing a devotional on your own, just planning through those things, it shows your kids that, you know, what we do on Sundays is important. It's not something that you just, oh, well, we're busy, we'll skip it this week. Like, no, this is important. This is a part of who we are, and kind of carrying that through. So yeah, great example, Julie. Does anybody else have anything? I know that there were a few of them kind of sprinkled throughout, but things that you could do, or I guess ideas that you guys have of things that you could do to make your family vacations more meaningful.
I mean, I don't know necessarily if it makes things more meaningful. That first suggestion, though, about food, shocker, I know. Jared really resonated with me that food could be a central part of vacation. I know you're all stunned by this.
Food's a central part of life.
Like, I mean, I live to eat. It's just the end of the story. But like,
You and me both.
that's it, Lane. But like, so that the family they were talking about, ice cream was their thing. For my
Mhm.
family growing up, there were a few things that happened on vacation every year. Wherever we went, my mom always bought an ornament. And so one of the things we were looking for while we were on vacation was where her ornament was going to come from and what it was going to look like. And sometimes we would look at different places. But like there was always a Christmas ornament on our tree from wherever we had traveled and been. And Karen and I still do this. Like we have ornaments from other places we've been and they hang on our tree. But the other thing my family always did on vacation was fudge. We always looked for the candy shop wherever we were at. And we would buy fudge. And we'd go in and we'd try all the samples and we would get our pound or more of fudge. But that was one of the things that we always looked for. And I could tell you about some great little candy shops in random towns in America, like the fantastic little candy shop that's kind of underground in Pagosa Springs, Colorado. Like, you know, but that was kind of always one of the things we did. And so some of those things that happened every year on vacation, wherever we were at, things we got or experiences we did, you know, that first part really kind of resonated with me because it tied into my own experiences and things that, you know, here I am. I haven't been on vacation with my parents in 12 years or 13 years and could still tell you about all the different candy shops where we bought fudge at through the years.
I don't like fudge that much, but I think it's a good idea.
Your loss.
I know. I could tell you about all different kinds of Sonics that we've been to across the country. There's a really cool one in Colorado. It fits with Colorado. I think it's a log cabin looking Sonic, but it's completely beside the point. We're all Coke addicts in our family. All right. Well, like I said, this was kind of a short chapter as far as the material that was presented. You know, obviously, we've all got experiences with vacations. I think it's easy to see that vacations are important. It just makes sense. Spending that time together and connecting, it makes sense. What's hard for, at least for me as an adult, is looking past the activities, looking past where we're going to go and what we're going to do to see that the important thing is, I mean, really just being together. And one of the things that, as Bob and I were talking about his upcoming trip today was, you know, he was talking about how one of the other couples that they're going with just they want to go to the beach house and sit on the porch at the beach house and read. And Bob said, I can't do that. I can't handle that. And which I totally understand. I'm the same way too. But they see that change, that change of location. It's not so much that they're going to do something that they couldn't do at home, but it's meaningful when you're doing it somewhere else. If that makes sense. I mean, growing up, when we would go camping, we were literally across the road from our house. I mean, and by across the road, I mean, it was like a mile and a half, but we were close to the house, but everything was different. And that's just part of that different location being significant. So I guess the main takeaways are, obviously, vacation is important. Spending time together is important. Spending lots of money is not. I mean, if you got it and you want to do it, great, but that's not the key. The key is being together, spending time together somewhere different that's out of routine. And that's longer than a couple of days. I mean, really, because it takes a couple of days to really get through that rough patch when you're in that different environment. So I think that's great. Anybody have anything else they want to add? I know a couple had to leave early, and that's absolutely fine, but I wanted to keep it as short as possible because, I mean, there's no point talking about the same thing over and over and over again, because that's the only way to make this chapter, over an hour long, I think.
Well, one thing that I liked about like going out with my family to go like eat dinner and stuff was that we would all like sit around the table and eat with each other and talk. It was really convenient and nice to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love getting together, and that's one of the reasons that like family meals are important. You get to talk, you get to sit around and you get to have a conversation, and it's nice. It's just really nice to me. If I'm at home and I'm eating a meal, it's good and we spend time talking, but in the back of my mind I'm like, okay, well, as soon as we get done eating, I've got to go do this and this and this, and well, we got to do dishes and then we got to do that. But when you're not doing it at home, when you are on vacation, when you're away, it's a lot less stressful. That's one of the things that's always been good for me, just to get out and get away, knowing that you can't do anything else. You're here to relax, and that's all you can do, and you need to just spend that time kind of decompressing. So
That's something
awesome.
I value too a lot with my family. Like when we sit down and have family meals, like whether it's with my mom's side of the family or my dad's. I have a big family at my dad's house, so there's like 20 people crowded around one dining room table, and we all talk to each other and share about how our day's been and just the crazy events in our life. And it's pretty funny, and it's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. And that's one of the things that it's hard for me. Like as I've gotten older, like I'm to the age where all but one of my grandparents have passed. And I can remember as a kid getting together and spending time around the table, and we would all get together, aunts, uncles, cousins, everybody would get together at grandma and grandpa's house. And that was our time to get together and see the whole family and talk about everything. And now that they have kind of passed on, it's hard to get everybody together. Like everybody was willing to get together to go to grandma's house. Like that's just what we did. But now that she's gone, it's like there's a lot of the family that we don't see very often. And my mom's doing a really good job. She's trying to kind of pick up where grandma left off and make sure those things happen. But on my dad's side of the family, like I see my dad's side of the family at funerals. Like that's really the only time that we get together is when somebody dies. And it's sad because you really could draw a 10-mile circle, and you could include all of my family, both sides, in one little circle. But that's just the way we are. We have our own routines, our own lives, and we get distracted until we spend intentional time together. And that's what's great about vacations, is it is intentional, planned time together. We miss out on a lot. So absolutely. All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up. Next week, we're going to do chapter 10. There's a little bit more in chapter 10 than there was in chapter 9. But if you have anything that comes up and have any ideas or anything you want to share, the conversation doesn't have to end now. We can pick it up next week, or you can message me and I'll put some of the comments out there on our Facebook page as well. So thanks guys for spending some time with us tonight, and hope you have a good rest of your week.